Are you about to conduct 360 feedback reviews with your team? Or maybe your organization is planning to roll it out? Then this video is for you. I'm going to provide you with some practical strategies and tips on how to conduct effective 360 feedback reviews. Hi, I'm Ann Koopman and I'm a former engineer and senior leader in the manufacturing industry. And now I'm a leadership coach for emerging leaders and an expert for team development. On this channel, I update you regularly with tips on leadership, self-leadership, and how to build effective teams. Make sure you hit that subscribe button right now so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Personally, I am a certified practitioner for 360 reviews. And because I know how difficult and also how important a proper management of these processes are, I do always recommend that you work with a professional, with a consultant or coach when conducting 360 feedback reviews in your organization. But I know this is not always possible, and some organizations have decided that they want to implement 360 reviews anyway, or it's part of the regular process. And if you find yourself in this situation, then as a manager, you might find it difficult to know how to use that information and support your employee as they go through reviewing the results. So whilst this is not easy, here are some practical tips that you can implement that will make it a bit more effective, and you both will walk away with some great results to implement. I will talk about tips of your role in this process and also the crucial steps during the conversation and some generic tips to consider. So when we talk about your role, it's important that you consciously step into the role of a coach and not their manager. They might feel awkward already and very vulnerable that they have to put out all the information in front of you, their manager. Because after all, 360 reviews include feedback from peers, from direct reports, from people above them. And it can be quite a vulnerable process. And having to openly share that with you as their manager might feel even more difficult. Your role is a coach. Your role is to support them in finding their strengths in this report and their opportunities for growth. Your role is not to provide your feedback, and your role is not to judge their behaviors in any way. This is about them figuring out what they want to take from the report, and it's not about you placing in your actions or your agenda into this meeting. You are a coach, which means that you are not supposed to interfere with the exact outcomes of this review. It's important that the individual is guided through finding their own solutions. When conducting the session, there are 3 important steps to consider. Step number 1 is around setting up the environment. Step number 2 is about sharing important feedback parameters and things that they need to know and be aware of. And step number 3 is about defining the actions and understanding the key points of these results. So step number 1 is all about setting the stage. And for that, you want to make sure that it's a safe environment, that both of you had enough time to prepare for the conversation, that it's in a setting that is private and nobody else can come and interrupt or hear what you're saying. You want to make sure it's a time that works for both of you, and you want to make sure that you manage your own and their emotions. You might feel a bit stressed because it's maybe one of your first 360 feedback reviews, and maybe there are some crucial points that will come up and you already know and anticipate that. So you have to manage your own emotions, but you will also have to manage the emotions of the other individual, because for them, they are going to be the person that's out here vulnerable, having to be open to look at feedback, and they will go through ups and downs throughout the conversation. Make sure that you warm up the conversation so that you don't dive straight in. So have some conversations easy, going into questions of how they're feeling, how they're going, so that you kind of warm up before you dive in. Use this time to also clarify your role, and that in this environment right now, you are going to be the coach and not their manager. Make sure that you say it's confidential. Whatever is discussed in here will not be shared with anyone else, because this is truly important for there to be trust and open conversations. And also make sure that you clarify that the objective is to identify the strengths that they want to use more of and how they can apply their strength more, and also identifying a few key developmental areas that are going to help them to be more effective in their role. Step 2 of the conversation is to make sure you talk about important feedback parameters so that they understand how to approach this feedback and how to digest what they see for them. And here's important to mention the following parameters. Number 1, feedback is always subjective. So whatever feedback is provided is based on the reality, the values, the experiences of the other people that were asked to provide feedback. This does not reflect reality. Feedback is always a subjective view of what the other people perceive and also what judgment they place on the behavior that they see. Another parameter to set here is that feedback is also provided based on everyone else's individual preferences when it comes to communication and feedback conversations. There are people that are very blunt and direct. There are people that are going to provide feedback while talking a little bit and beating around the bush. There are going to be people that are very gentle. Some are very direct and sharp and just provide certain bits of information. So based on everybody else's understanding and preferences and even their mood on the day, they're going to provide feedback in a certain way. Sometimes it can be even that something happened on the day, or they just remember one incident from the day before, and that's how they frame all the feedback because that's the situation that they think about. Often people also don't necessarily know what to say, so they kind of try to find some memories of when they've seen the person in action just to say something and write something because they feel like they have to write something in these feedback questionnaires. So this is just important because to be aware of human factors that play a part when other people provide feedback in a 360 conversation or feedback procedure. The third parameter to share is that feedback or opportunities for development do not reflect incompetence or any failure. You're opening yourself up for feedback, and so that's why people are mentioning something. You're asking for ways you can improve, and that's why people are providing this feedback. If you ask for it, you will receive it. And of course, sometimes the individuals haven't asked for a 360, but it's important to set the frame that it doesn't show that they are a failure or that they don't have a certain competence. It just shows room for improvement. And the fourth parameter is that it's important for them to know that this is just information. It's not the truth. It's not the reality. It's their information and they get to choose what they take from it. They have the power to decide what matters to them, what they want to believe and take on board, and what is going to be useful and helpful for them moving forward. It's just information, nothing else. Okay, so once you've set the stage for the conversation and you shared those feedback parameters, it's time to dive into the feedback. And here, your role is going to be to help them stay on track a little bit and ask guiding questions for them to figure out what they can take from this information that they see. Humans do have a tendency in these conversations to jump straight to the negative points and to kind of keep lingering on those negative things. Make sure that you help them move back to the strength and move back to the positive things. Because often one negative thought or comment can actually have a bigger impact than 10 great strengths that I mentioned. So help them find that balance, help them see and pay attention to also the good things that I mentioned and not just the negative feedback or the areas for development. So we first want to start looking at their strength. You can ask them, when you look at this feedback, what are the strengths that stand out to you? What are the 2 or 3 things that are commonly addressed and that are standing out as your strength? Are there any surprises? Is there anything that makes you curious to understand more? Are there any differences in what certain people see in your strength? So often 360 reviews are set up as input from peers, from direct reports, and from senior managers or executives or other stakeholders. And you can often see the results of these different groups in the 360 feedback. And so it's also really interesting to start to see, are certain groups seeing some strengths and other groups see different strengths, and help the individual explore why this could be. What behaviors lead to them showing a certain strength in one area with certain people and another strength in another area, because that will also give them some great ideas of what they can do to showcase their strength towards a broader group. When we look at the results of those different groups, make sure though that they don't get stuck in trying to understand who said what, which comment comes from which person. You won't be able to completely avoid that because human nature, we just kind of want to know. But make sure that you stay on the content level and don't get too focused on who might the person be that provided the feedback, because that's in the end is not really helpful. We want to distract the information, but we don't want to get lost in it. Then you want to move their attention towards the opportunities for development. And you can ask something like, looking at these suggestions for development, what are the 1, 2, or 3 key areas that stand out to you? What are areas that you feel like are valid and are going to be helping you to be more effective in the future? Are there any surprises? Again, here, are there any differences in how the different groups perceive you? And then lastly, the last step is to help them define actions. Some individuals prefer to do this step on their own, in their own time, and that's totally okay. You can also let them do this in their own time and then define a time and date when you come back to discuss it. But maybe they are open to working through this step with you. Help them stay on a level of looking at this as what is going to be most helpful for them. A framework that you can use as what do they want to start, stop, continue after they looked at this information. And then I would start with looking at their strengths. What strengths do they want to be known for? How can they apply their strengths more effectively starting tomorrow? And then also identifying 1 or 2 or 3 opportunities for development for them to implement, and what actions can they take here to start with changing or improving their behaviors in certain situations. So now you know how to set up this conversation. It's important that you set the right environment, you focus on feedback parameters, and then you look at the results by focusing on the strength and the development opportunities and defining actions. Some general coaching tips for you as you go through this is to keep in mind that this is a very vulnerable time for the individual. If you realize that they might need a break because they are kind of stuck in the emotions and they might be in fight or flight or freeze mode, then maybe give them some time to step aside, take a breath, and come back after a few minutes. Because if they're in an emotional state, they won't be able to really look at this information and take anything from it. It might just hurt them in that moment too much and make them feel very vulnerable. And let them talk for most of it. You are just there to be a coach, to ask some guiding questions, and to help them stay on track and focus on the information that they want to draw from it, and to help them not getting stuck in a negative cycle. But they are supposed to do most of the talking because this is their time. It's like a coaching session for them to really understand what they want to take from it. So make sure that you don't do all the talking and you don't tell them what to do with this information. If they ask you for advice, of course, you can give advice. So these were the key tips. Let me know what you find most helpful. I know that these conversations might feel a little bit tricky, especially if you're not really practicing in it, and they do take a bit of time to getting used to. But your role as a manager is key, and if you are the one that is going to have to do this feedback conversation with them, make sure that you support them in getting the best out of it, and so that they stay effective and that they pick out certain things that will help them moving forward in a better way. Stay solution focused, future focused, and don't get stuck on negative things. If you want more tips on how to provide feedback or how to have effective one-on-one meetings, check out these videos up here, and I'm looking forward to seeing you soon.